The gunshots shattered the winter silence before Sarah Turner even saw the outlaws emerge from the tree line, their horses kicking up clouds of fresh powder as they surrounded her wagon on the desolate mountain pass between Shoshone, Idaho, and the mining camp where her father worked. It was December 1883, and the snow had been falling steadily for 3 days. Sarah had made the journey alone because her father needed his medicine, the kind only the town apothecary could provide for his failing lungs. At 22 years old, she had made this trek a dozen times before, but never in weather this brutal, never when the mountain wolves were hungry and desperate men were even hungrier. She pulled her mare to a halt, her breath forming white clouds in the frigid air. 6 men materialized through the swirling snow, their faces wrapped in scarves, their eyes hard and predatory. The leader, a tall man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, urged his horse forward until he was close enough that Sarah could smell the whiskey on his breath. "Well now, what do we have here?" His voice was rough as gravel, carrying a Missouri accent that had no business being in these Idaho mountains. "Pretty little thing, all alone on Christmas week. That does not seem very safe, does it, boys?" The others laughed, a chorus of cruel sounds that made Sarah's stomach turn to ice. She reached slowly for the rifle beside her seat, but one of the outlaws was faster. A shot rang out and wood splintered inches from her hand. The mare reared, nearly throwing Sarah from the wagon. "None of that now," the scarred leader said, moving closer. "We will make this simple. You give us everything in that wagon, maybe that nice coat you are wearing, and we will let you walk back to town. Might freeze to death, but at least you will have a chance." Sarah's fingers trembled, but not from the cold. She knew these mountains, knew that walking back to Shoshone in this weather without proper clothing was a death sentence. The temperature had already dropped below 0, and nightfall was less than 2 hours away. "Please," she said, hating how her voice shook. "My father is dying. I need to get this medicine to him. Take whatever else you want, but let me keep the medicine and enough clothing to survive." The leader tilted his head, considering. Then he smiled, and it was the smile of a rattlesnake before it struck. "I think we will take it all. Boys, help the lady down from her wagon." 2 men dismounted, their boots crunching in the deep snow. Sarah looked around frantically, searching for escape, but the pass was narrow here, hemmed in by steep rocky walls on one side and a sheer drop on the other. The outlaws had positioned themselves perfectly to block any route forward or back. The first man grabbed the wagon's side, preparing to climb up. The second was reaching for Sarah's arm when the world exploded into violence. The crack of a rifle cut through the air, and the man reaching for Sarah dropped like a stone, a red bloom spreading across the snow beneath him. Before the echo faded, 3 more shots followed in rapid succession, so fast they almost sounded like one continuous roar. 3 more outlaws fell from their horses, dead before they hit the ground, 4 men down in less than 3 seconds. The scarred leader wheeled his horse around, his own weapon half drawn, his face a mask of shock and terror. The remaining outlaw, a younger man with wild eyes, had his gun out but was pointing it in every direction, unable to locate the shooter through the heavy snowfall. "Drop your weapons." The voice came from somewhere up the rocky slope, deep and steady and absolutely certain. "Drop them now, or join your friends." The young outlaw's nerve broke. He threw his pistol into the snow and raised his hands high. The leader was made of sterner, stupider stuff. He finished drawing his weapon and fired twice toward the rocks, the shots going wild. A 5th crack answered him, and the gun flew from his hand, taking 2 of his fingers with it. He screamed, clutching his ruined hand to his chest. "I said drop it," the voice repeated. "Next one goes through your skull." This time, the leader complied, though he was barely coherent through his pain and rage. "You bastard! You shot my fingers off. Be grateful it was not your head." Boots crunched in the snow, and a figure emerged from behind an outcropping of rock about 30 feet up the slope. He was tall and lean, wearing a heavy sheepskin coat and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. He carried a Winchester rifle with the easy confidence of someone who knew exactly how to use it, and he descended the treacherous slope with the sure-footedness of a mountain cat. As he drew closer, Sarah could finally see him clearly. He looked to be in his late 20s, with a strong jaw darkened by several days of stubble and eyes the color of storm clouds. There was something in his face that spoke of hard years and harder choices, but also of an unwavering moral code. He was not handsome in the conventional sense, but there was something compelling about him, something that made Sarah unable to look away. He reached the pass floor and moved toward the two surviving outlaws, his rifle never wavering. "Strip," he ordered. "What?" The scarred leader stared at him in disbelief. "You heard me. Strip down to your underclothes, both of you now. We will freeze to death. You are going to do worse to her." The cowboy's voice was flat, emotionless. "Now you get a taste of it. Strip, get on your horses and ride. If I ever see either of you in these mountains again, I will not be so merciful." The young outlaw was already pulling off his coat with shaking hands. The leader hesitated, but one look at the cowboy's eyes convinced him. Within minutes, both men were down to their long underwear, their stolen goods and weapons piled in the snow. The cowboy gestured with his rifle and they scrambled onto their horses. "Go on! Get out of here!" They rode off at a gallop, disappearing into the swirling white. The cowboy watched until they were out of sight, then finally lowered his weapon. He turned to Sarah, and something in his expression softened. "Are you hurt, miss?" Sarah realized she had been holding her breath. She let it out in a rush, her whole body beginning to shake as the terror and adrenaline caught up with her. "No, no, I am fine. Thank you. They would have killed me. Most likely." He moved to the dead outlaws, checking each one briefly before beginning to drag them off the trail. Sarah noticed he did this with a grim efficiency, like a man who had done such things before and taken no pleasure in it. "Can you help me with these? We need to get them off the pass before dark." It was gruesome work, but Sarah understood the necessity. They pulled the 4 bodies into a shallow ravine, where the snow would cover them until spring. The cowboy collected their weapons and valuables, loading them onto one of the now riderless horses. "Blood money," he explained, seeing her expression, "but money all the same. The territorial marshal will want these weapons as evidence, and any bounties on these men should go to you. You were the intended victim. I do not want blood money. Then give it to your church or to widows and orphans, but take it all the same." He secured the last of the items, then turned to face her fully. "I am William Hollister. I have a claim up in the high country about 5 miles north of here. Sarah Turner. My father and I live in a cabin near the Copper Ridge mine." She hugged herself, suddenly aware of how cold she was despite her heavy coat. "How did you happen to be here? This pass is usually deserted in winter." "I was hunting. Saw the tracks of 6 horses moving together, all shod. That is unusual enough this time of year. Then I heard voices and came to investigate." He looked up at the darkening sky. "Storm is getting worse. You need to get to shelter." "I was heading to the mining camp. My father needs his medicine." William studied her for a long moment. "The camp is another 8 miles through the worst of the pass. You will not make it before full dark, not in these conditions. My cabin is much closer, and it is off the main trail. Those 2 I sent packing might get brave again, especially the one with the scarred face." He looked like the type to hold a grudge. Sarah knew he was right, but propriety warred with common sense. "I cannot. It would not be proper for me to stay in your cabin. It is not proper to freeze to death either." His voice was gentle but firm. "Miss Turner, I give you my word as a gentleman that you will be perfectly safe. I have a spare room, a good fire, and enough supplies to wait out this storm. Once it clears, I will ride with you to the mining camp and then back to Shoshone. But right now, we need to move." The wind chose that moment to gust hard enough to nearly knock Sarah off her feet. William caught her elbow, steadying her, and even through their layers of clothing, she felt the strength in his grip. She looked into his eyes and saw only honest concern. "All right," she said. "Thank you, Mr. Hollister." "William, please. Mr. Hollister makes me sound like a banker." He helped her back onto her wagon seat, then mounted one of the outlaw horses and took the reins of the other. "Follow close behind me. The trail gets narrow." They traveled in silence through the mounting storm. True to his word, William led them off the main pass onto a smaller trail that wound up into dense pine forest. The trees provided some shelter from the wind, and after about 40 minutes of careful progress, Sarah saw a cabin materialize through the snow. It was larger than she had expected, well built from solid logs with a stone chimney from which smoke was rising. A small barn stood nearby, and William headed there first, helping Sarah unhitch her mare and get all 3 horses inside and brushed down. The barn was warm and dry, with fresh hay in the stalls. "You have a nice place," Sarah said, meaning it. Everything was well maintained and organized, the mark of a man who took pride in his work. "I have been here 5 years. Built most of it myself, with some help from a Shoshone elder who taught me how to build for these winters." He finished with the last horse and gestured toward the cabin. "Come on, let us get you warmed up." The inside of the cabin was even more impressive than the outside. It was a single large room with a sleeping loft above, furnished simply but comfortably. A large stone fireplace dominated one wall, and a fire crackled cheerfully in the hearth. There was a sturdy table with 4 chairs, a rocking chair near the fire, shelves lined with books, and cooking supplies hanging from hooks. A ladder led to the loft where Sarah could see a neatly made bed. "The loft is yours," William said, adding wood to the fire. "I will sleep down here. There are extra blankets in the chest at the foot of the bed. The privy is out back, about 20 feet from the door. I keep a rope strung from the cabin to it during winter, so you will not get lost in the storm." Sarah moved closer to the fire, feeling the warmth seep into her frozen limbs. Now that the immediate danger had passed, she found herself studying her rescuer more carefully. He moved with economical grace, his hands quick and capable as he prepared coffee and began assembling ingredients for a meal. There was a quietness to him, a self-sufficiency that spoke of years spent alone. "Have you lived alone all this time?" she asked, then immediately regretted the personal question. "Forgive me, that is none of my business. It is all right." William smiled slightly, and it transformed his face, making him suddenly, startlingly handsome. "Yes, I have been alone. It suits me most of the time. I came west after the war, needed space and quiet after all that noise and death." "You fought in the war," Sarah calculated quickly. "He would have been just a boy when it ended in 1865. The tail end of it. I was 16 when I enlisted, lied about my age, saw enough in those last months to last me a lifetime." He poured coffee into 2 tin cups and handed her one. "What about you? You are a long way from wherever you came from originally. Your accent says New England." "Boston," Sarah confirmed, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. "My mother died when I was 12. My father worked in a shoe factory there, but his lungs could not take the dust and chemicals. The doctor said clean air or death. So we came west 6 years ago, Tried farming first in Oregon, then father found work in the mines here. It is not much better for his lungs, but at least it pays enough for medicine and food. No other family. No, just the two of us." She sipped the coffee, which was strong and good. "That is why I had to make the trip for his medicine. He was too sick to travel, and we cannot afford to pay anyone else to make the journey." William nodded, his expression thoughtful. He began frying salt pork in a pan, adding potatoes and onions. The smell made Sarah's stomach rumble, reminding her that she had not eaten since dawn. "You saved my life today," she said quietly. "Those men would have killed me after they took everything. I saw it in their eyes." "You probably did." William did not sugarcoat it. "That scarred one was Jack Holloway. I heard the marshal in Shoshone talking about him last month. He is wanted in 3 territories for robbery and murder. The territorial government is offering $500 for him, dead or alive. You let him go." "I let him ride off to freeze in his underclothes. Given the temperature and the storm, he has maybe a 50-50 chance of surviving the night. Better odds than he deserved, but I am not keen on shooting a man once he is disarmed." He plated the food and brought it to the table. "Sit. Eat." They ate in comfortable silence, Sarah gradually relaxing as the food and warmth did their work. Outside, the storm howled and raged, but inside the cabin it was cozy and safe. She found herself watching William, noticing small things. The way he moved with quiet confidence, the sadness that lingered in his eyes when he thought she was not looking, the careful courtesy with which he treated her. After dinner, William washed the dishes while Sarah dried them. It was a domestic scene, oddly intimate, and Sarah felt a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the fire. "Tell me about your claim," she said. "What are you mining for?" "Silver, mostly, some copper. I have a small shaft about half a mile from here. It is not a big operation, but it pays well enough. I sell the ore in Shoshone twice a year, live on the proceeds." He hung the last pan on its hook. "It is a solitary life, but honest work. Do you ever get lonely?" William was quiet for a long moment. "Yes," he finally said. "Yes, I do. But I have not. I have not felt ready for anything else. After the war, I was too angry. Then I was too numb. Now I am just too used to being alone, I suppose." Sarah understood that feeling more than she could say. She and her father had each other, but there was a loneliness in being responsible for someone else's survival, in having no one to share her own burdens with. At 22, most women her age were married with children, but there had been no time for courting, no opportunity to build a life beyond mere survival. "I understand," she said softly. "After my mother died, I had to become the woman of the house at 12 years old. I learned to cook, clean, manage money, nurse my father through his bad spells. There has never been time for anything else, never been time to be young." William looked at her then, really looked at her, and something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps, or understanding. Two souls who had been weathered by life before their time, who had learned to endure rather than live. "You should rest," he said, his voice slightly rough. "Tomorrow will be a long day if the storm clears." Sarah nodded and climbed the ladder to the loft. The bed was comfortable, the blankets thick and warm. She could hear William moving around below, banking the fire and settling into the rocking chair. She expected to lie awake, her mind churning with the day's events, but exhaustion claimed her almost immediately. She woke once in the deep night to hear William cry out, a wordless sound of anguish. She sat up, listening, and heard him moving restlessly below. Nightmares, she realized. The war still haunted him, even 18 years later. She wanted to go down to him, to offer comfort, but she did not know him well enough, did not have the right. So she lay back down and listened until his breathing settled into the rhythm of sleep once more. Morning came with brilliant sunshine streaming through the cabin windows. The storm had passed, leaving the world transformed into a crystalline wonderland. Sarah climbed down from the loft to find William already up, with fresh coffee brewing and biscuits baking. "How did you sleep?" he asked, not quite meeting her eyes. "Well, thank you." She did not mention what she had heard. "The storm has cleared." "It has. We should be able to reach the mining camp by afternoon, then get you back to Shoshone by evening if we push hard." He set a plate of biscuits and honey on the table. "Eat up. We have a long ride ahead." They ate quickly and prepared to leave. William saddled all the horses, loading the outlaw weapons and goods onto the spare mounts. The morning was cold but clear, the sun glinting off the new snow with blinding intensity. The ride to the mining camp took most of the day, even with good weather. William proved to be easy company, pointing out landmarks and wildlife tracks, telling stories about his years in the mountains. Sarah found herself laughing at his dry observations, enjoying his quiet humor. They reached the mining camp in early afternoon. Sarah's father, Samuel Turner, was shocked to see her return with a strange man and 2 extra horses, but his relief at getting his medicine overshadowed everything else. He was a thin, worn man in his 50s, his face gray with exhaustion and illness. Sarah administered the medicine immediately while William explained what had happened on the pass. Samuel's face went pale. "Jack Holloway, good Lord, Sarah, you could have been killed." "She nearly was," William said bluntly. "Mr. Turner, I do not mean to speak out of turn, but your daughter should not be making these journeys alone. It is not safe, especially in winter." "I know that," Samuel said, his voice rough with emotion and congestion. "But I cannot make the trip myself, and we cannot afford to hire anyone." "Then I will do it," William said. The words came out before he seemed to think about them, surprising everyone including himself. "I mean, I come to Shoshone regularly anyway. I could check on what supplies you need, make the runs when necessary. No charge." Sarah stared at him. "We could not possibly ask you to do that." "You are not asking. I am offering." William met her eyes steadily. "I saw what almost happened yesterday. I will not stand by and let it happen next time because you had no choice but to risk the journey alone." Samuel looked between them, seeing something in their faces that made him nod slowly. "That is very generous of you, Mr. Hollister. We would be grateful for the help." They stayed at the mining camp for another hour, long enough for Samuel to rest and take a second dose of his medicine. Then Sarah and William began the final leg of the journey to Shoshone, arriving just as the sun was setting behind the western peaks. The town was small but bustling, its main street lined with businesses that served the mining camps scattered throughout the surrounding mountains. William took the outlaw horses and their cargo to the marshal's office, while Sarah went to the general store to replenish supplies. They met again at the hotel, where William had taken a room for the night. "I will ride back to my cabin in the morning," he said, standing in the hotel lobby with his hat in his hands. "But I meant what I said about helping you and your father. I will come to Shoshone in 2 weeks. If you need anything before then, send word through the general store. They know how to reach me." Sarah felt an unexpected pang at the thought of him leaving. In just a day and a half she had grown accustomed to his presence, to his steady competence and quiet kindness. "Thank you," she said, wishing she had better words, "for everything. I owe you my life." "You do not owe me anything." William hesitated, then did something that surprised her. He reached out and gently took her hand. "But I would like to see you again, not out of obligation, but because I would like to." Sarah's heart fluttered in her chest. She looked down at their joined hands, his rough and calloused from years of hard work, her small within his grip. "I would like that too," she said softly. William smiled, that rare, transformative smile that made him handsome. "Good. Then I will see you in 2 weeks." He rode out at dawn the next morning. Sarah watched from her father's boarding house window as he disappeared into the distance, already counting the days until his return. The 2 weeks passed with excruciating slowness. Sarah helped her father recover his strength, did laundry and mending for the other miners to earn extra money, and thought about William far more than she should. She found herself remembering small details. The way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the steadiness of his voice, the gentleness of his hands despite their strength. On the 14th day, she rose early and took extra care with her appearance, putting on her best dress and arranging her dark hair in a neat bun. Her father noticed and said nothing, but he smiled knowingly. William arrived at mid-morning, riding down the main street of Shoshone on his sturdy bay gelding. He had trimmed his beard and was wearing a clean shirt under his coat. Sarah met him at the general store, her heart racing foolishly. "Miss Turner," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "You look well." "Thank you, so do you." She felt suddenly shy, unsure of herself in a way she had not experienced since girlhood. "Do you have business in town?" "Some. I need to pick up supplies, see the marshal about those bounties." He paused. "And I was hoping you might have dinner with me tonight, at the hotel restaurant, if that would be proper." Sarah felt a smile spread across her face. That would be very proper, and very nice. They spent the afternoon conducting their respective errands, then met at the hotel as planned. The restaurant was small but clean, with checked tablecloths and candles on each table. It was the closest thing Shoshone had to fine dining, and Sarah felt special as William held her chair for her. Over roast beef and potatoes, they talked. Really talked, in a way Sarah had rarely experienced with anyone. William told her about his childhood in Pennsylvania, the farm where he grew up, the brother he lost at Gettysburg. She told him about Boston, her mother's illness, the fear and uncertainty of moving west. "I was so angry at my father for bringing us here," she admitted. "I missed my friends, my school, everything familiar. But now I cannot imagine being anywhere else. These mountains feel like home in a way Boston never did." "I know what you mean," William said. "When I first came west, I was running away from everything. But somewhere along the way I found something worth staying for. Peace, maybe, or purpose." He looked at her across the candlelight. "Or maybe I was just waiting to find a reason." The air between them felt charged, full of possibility. When William walked Sarah back to her father's boarding house, he took her hand again, and this time she laced her fingers through his. "May I call on you again?" he asked at the doorstep. "Properly, I mean, court you if you will have me." Sarah's answer was simple and certain. "Yes." Thus began a courtship unlike any Sarah had imagined. William came to Shoshone every 2 weeks without fail, timing his visits to coincide with when her father needed supplies or medicine. He was scrupulously proper, always ensuring Samuel was present as a chaperone, never pushing for more than Sarah was ready to give. But in the spaces between propriety, something deep and true grew between them. On cold winter evenings, they sat by Samuel's fire and talked for hours, discovering shared loves of reading and music, debating politics and philosophy, laughing at each other's stories. William brought Sarah books from his collection, and she read them eagerly, returning them with notes in the margins that made him smile. In the spring, when the snow melted and the mountains burst into bloom, William took Sarah riding through the high meadows. They talked about their dreams, their fears, the lives they hoped to build. William confessed his worry that he was too damaged by war to be a good husband, and Sarah confessed her fear that she had become too practical, too hardened by responsibility to remember how to be soft. "You are not hard," William told her, holding her hand as they sat beside a rushing creek. "You are strong. There is a difference. You have been tested by life and not found wanting. That is admirable, not a flaw. You are not damaged, Sarah replied. You are healing. And I will help you if you let me. By summer, everyone in Shoshone knew they were courting. Samuel approved wholeheartedly, having developed a deep respect for William's character. The other miners teased Sarah gently about her cowboy, and she bore it with good humor because she was happier than she had ever been. In August, William took Sarah to his cabin for a proper visit, with Samuel accompanying them as chaperone. Sarah saw the place where William had built his life, saw the care he had taken with every detail. She met his closest neighbor, a Shoshone elder named Gray Wolf, who had taught William to survive in the mountains and who blessed their union with quiet approval. That evening, as the three of them sat outside watching the sun set behind the peaks, William asked Samuel for permission to marry his daughter. Samuel gave it gladly, with tears in his eyes. William turned to Sarah, his expression nervous for the first time since she had known him. I do not have much to offer you, a cabin in the mountains, a modest income from the claim, a simple life. But I can promise you faithfulness, respect, and love that will last until my dying day. Sarah Turner, will you marry me? Sarah did not hesitate. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. They married in September 1884, in the small church in Shoshone with half the town in attendance. Sarah wore a dress she had sewn herself from blue calico, and William wore his best suit, looking handsome and nervous and overwhelmingly happy. Samuel walked his daughter down the aisle with pride, and Gray Wolf stood as William's witness. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, William kissed Sarah with such tenderness that several of the women in attendance wept. Sarah felt like she was floating, anchored only by William's hand in hers. They spent their wedding night in the hotel in Shoshone, then traveled to William's cabin, their cabin, to begin their life together. Samuel came with them, moving into a new room William had built onto the cabin specifically for his father-in-law. It was a strange arrangement by some standards, but it worked for them. Samuel's health was too fragile for him to live alone, and Sarah would not abandon him. The first months of marriage were an adjustment, but a joyful one. Sarah learned the rhythms of mountain life, tending their garden and chickens, helping William with the lighter work of the claim. William learned to share his space and his life, to talk about his feelings instead of burying them, to accept comfort when the nightmares came. They grew together, two wounded souls healing through love and partnership. William taught Sarah to shoot, to track game, to read the weather in the mountains. Sarah taught William to be gentle with himself, to laugh more freely, to believe he deserved happiness. Their love deepened through that first winter, through long nights by the fire and shared work during the days. They learned each other's bodies and hearts with equal tenderness, building an intimacy that was both physical and spiritual. In the spring of 1885, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. William was overjoyed and terrified in equal measure, fussing over her until she laughingly told him to stop treating her like she was made of glass. Samuel was delighted at the prospect of becoming a grandfather. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and into fall. William became even more protective, insisting on doing all the heavy work while Sarah rested. She bore his hovering with patience because she knew it came from love and fear of loss. In November, as the first snows began to fall, Sarah went into labor. William rode through a gathering storm to fetch the midwife from Shoshone, a capable woman named Martha who had delivered half the babies in the territory. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day. William paced frantically downstairs while Samuel and Martha tended to Sarah. He had faced Confederate soldiers without flinching, had shot 4 men in seconds to save her life, but the sound of her cries of pain nearly unmade him. Finally, in the gray light of dawn, a baby's wail split the air. William took the stairs 3 at a time, bursting into the bedroom to find Sarah exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle in her arms. "A boy," she said, her voice hoarse but triumphant. "We have a son." William approached slowly, almost reverently. He looked down at the tiny red face, the miniature fists waving in the air, and felt something crack open in his chest. Love, pure and overwhelming, flooded through him. "He is perfect," William whispered, touching one small hand with his finger. The baby's fist closed around it immediately, gripping tight. "He is absolutely perfect." They named him Samuel William Hollister, after both his grandfathers. Little Sam, as they called him, was a healthy, hungry baby with strong lungs and his father's gray eyes. William proved to be a devoted father, walking the floor with Sam when he fussed at night, singing old army ballads in his rough voice until the baby fell asleep. Sarah watched her husband with their son and fell even more deeply in love. William had worried he was too damaged to be a good husband and father, but he was both of those things and more. He was patient and gentle, firm when necessary, but never harsh. The years that followed were full and rich. In 1887, Sarah gave birth to a daughter they named Grace, who had her mother's dark hair and her father's quiet temperament. 2 years later came another son, James, who was loud and adventurous from birth. The cabin grew along with their family. William added more rooms, a larger barn, a proper smokehouse. The claim proved profitable enough to provide a comfortable life, and Sarah started a small business making and selling preserves and baked goods to the mining camps. Samuel lived to see all 3 of his grandchildren born, passing peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1890. They buried him in the family plot behind the cabin, on a hillside overlooking the mountains he had grown to love. William carved a beautiful headstone, and Sarah planted wildflowers that bloomed every spring. The children grew strong and healthy, raised with love and discipline in equal measure. Sam was serious and studious like his father, Grace was creative and thoughtful, and James was the adventurer who gave his parents gray hairs with his exploits. William taught them all to ride, shoot, and respect the mountains. Sarah taught them to read, to think critically, to treat all people with dignity. Through it all, William and Sarah's love continued to deepen. They had their disagreements, of course, their moments of friction as any married couple does. But they had learned to communicate, to listen, to put each other first. The foundation built during their courtship proved unshakable. On their 10th anniversary in 1894, William took Sarah on a ride to the high meadow where he had first told her he loved her. The children stayed with Gray Wolf, who had become an honorary grandfather to them. "I have been thinking," William said as they sat by the creek, "about that day on the pass when I first saw you. How close I came to not investigating those tracks, to just staying home that day." "But you did not," Sarah said, leaning against his shoulder. "You saved my life." "You saved mine too," William replied. "I was half dead inside before I met you, just going through the motions of living. You brought me back, Sarah. You made me want to be fully alive again." Sarah turned to look at him, seeing the lines that time and weather had etched into his face, the silver beginning to thread through his dark hair. He was 41 now, and she was 33, but the love in his eyes when he looked at her was as fresh and strong as it had been that first night in his cabin. "We saved each other," she said softly. "That is what love does. It saves us from loneliness, from despair, from ourselves. And it gives us something worth living for." William kissed her then, a kiss full of tenderness and passion and promise. They sat together as the sun set behind the mountains, two souls who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful. The years continued to pass. Sam grew into a fine young man who went to study engineering in Boise. Grace became a teacher in Shoshone, beloved by her students. James eventually settled down and took over the mining claim from his father, proving to have a good head for business. William and Sarah grew old together, their love weathering time and change. William's nightmares faded to occasional shadows, eased by Sarah's presence beside him. Sarah's early hardness melted away completely, replaced by a contentment she had never imagined possible. They became fixtures in the community, respected and beloved. William served as deputy marshal for a few years, his steady judgment and quick draw proving valuable. Sarah started a library in Shoshone, donating many of William's books and working to acquire more. They welcomed grandchildren with joy and spoiled them shamelessly. On a spring day in 1910, 26 years after William had saved Sarah from outlaws on a snowy pass, they sat together on the porch of their cabin. William was 67 now, his hair fully silver, his body still strong despite the years. Sarah was 59, her face lined but still beautiful, her dark hair streaked with white. "You ever regret it?" William asked, holding her hand as they rocked in chairs he had built for their 20th anniversary. "Marrying me, living up here in the mountains instead of in a proper town." Sarah looked at him with surprise and amusement. "Regret?" "William Hollister, after 26 years of marriage, how can you even ask that question?" "I just want to be sure," William said with a smile. "Make sure I am still living up to my wedding vows. You have exceeded them in every possible way." Sarah squeezed his hand. "I have lived a life richer than I ever dreamed possible. I have known love, raised beautiful children, built a home in these mountains I adore. I have no regrets, my love. Not a single one." "Neither do I," William said quietly. "You were the best thing that ever happened to me, Sarah." "You still are." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the mountains in shades of gold and rose. 3 grandchildren played in the yard, their laughter bright in the clear mountain air. Smoke rose from the chimney of the cabin that had sheltered 2 generations. In the distance, an eagle soared against the endless sky. Sarah thought back to that terrifying day in December 1883, when she had been cornered by outlaws and certain she would die. She thought of the cowboy who had appeared like an avenging angel, who had killed 4 men in seconds to save her life. She thought of every moment since, every joy and sorrow, every triumph and challenge they had faced together. "Thank you," she said softly, though she was not sure if she was speaking to William, to God, or to fate itself. "Thank you for everything." William understood, as he always did. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "The pleasure has been all mine." As the sun set behind the mountains they loved, William and Sarah Hollister sat together in the peace they had built, surrounded by family and the life they had created. 2 souls who had found each other in the wild winter, who had chosen love over loneliness, who had built something lasting and true. Their love story had begun with violence and fear on a snowy mountain pass, but it had transformed into something beautiful. It had endured through decades, deepened through trials, and grown stronger with every passing year. And on that spring evening in 1910, as twilight painted the Idaho mountains in shades of purple and gold, it continued still, eternal as the mountains themselves, unshakable as the foundation of the home they had built together. The outlaws who had threatened Sarah that winter day were long forgotten, reduced to cautionary tales told by the fire. But the love between Sarah Turner and William Hollister lived on, a testament to the power of courage, compassion, and the choice to build rather than destroy. It lived on in their children and grandchildren, in the community they had helped shape, in the mountains that had witnessed their journey from strangers to soulmates. And if love could be measured not in words but in moments, in the quiet daily choices to be kind, to be faithful, to be present, then theirs was a love beyond measure. A Wild West love story that had started with gunshots and ended in grace, proving that even in the hardest times, in the wildest places, love could not only survive but flourish. Their story became legend in Shoshone, told and retold through the generations. The cabin still stood decades later, a monument to what two people could build when they chose love over fear. And every winter, when snow fell on the mountain pass where it all began, locals would remember the day a cowboy saved a woman's life and found his own in the process. This was their legacy. Not wealth or fame, but love that lasted, family that flourished, and a life well lived in the shadow of the mountains they called home.